Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm here with my cat Leia. I'm not sure how long she's going to stay. She's either in a burrowing mood or a leaving mood, I think, or right now she's in attention mood. And yet I'm filming a video. I thought I'd do a special Am reading video for the Jewish holidays because the New Year, Rosh Hashanah, will be starting the evening of the day that I hopefully post this. It's been a while since I've made a video like this, or at least it feels that way, because I have a lot of books that I want to talk about. I guess I'll start with my audiobook that I finally started today, The Princess Diarist by Carrie Fisher. It seems that I am slowly getting through Carrie Fisher's memoirs, or at least this is the second, and I have her third in holds for my digital library holds. And I like this one. I don't know, I kind of was expecting it to only be her diary entries from the 70s and when she was filming, but so far she's only been recounting from the present, and I feel like that goes really well. She's just she was so comical and confident in what she was saying, and I'm finding it very enjoyable. It's always interesting to hear the stories from on set in more detail than I've heard her go into them before in her other memoir. It's a bit bittersweet. I mean, she even talks in there about when I die, you'll remember me this way or that way, so it's almost like hearing a ghost. But I'd suggest listening to the audiobook because Carrie Fisher was so expressive and she had such command over her own words, so I'm still enjoying it even though it's bittersweet. It's also very short. Next, I finished Judenstaat by Simone Zelitch. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than the other alt history book that I was reading last week, because I am in the midst of doing a Jewish alt history reading where I hope to review these two books that I just mentioned and a third book that I'll talk about soon. Anyway, I enjoyed this book. Down she goes. It's sort of a noir mystery, I want to say, although I really shouldn't say things like that. I don't know much about genre at all other than sci-fi and fantasy. But it takes place in this alternate history reality where a Jewish state was created post-World War II in basically the area that was East Germany. And 40 years later, there's a certain video archivist and filmmaker who is making an anniversary piece, and all of these historical secrets come to light. But it's actually not all that clear. It's all a little more murky and complicated than some big gotcha moment, and I really appreciated that. Although, on the other hand, I think it was all a little too murky the way that it came together. I'm still sort of germinating. I haven't even written my Goodreads review yet. But mostly, I think this brings up really interesting questions about the nature of memory, collective memory, and of the idea of justice and whether or not it's possible or applicable. And it also goes into issues of the Cold War and the Soviet Union versus America, and it kind of reminded me of those Marvel movies in a way, because it's sort of imagining an askance look at the Cold War conflict. And in the Marvel movies, it's through mutants and superpower humans. And in this book, Judenstaat is sort of a little bit of a tug-of-war thing, kind of. It's mostly, it's a socialist state. It's had a lot of contact with the USSR. It's also a bit under the USSR's thumb, but things are kind of starting to change in the 80s in this book. It's interesting also to track what Zelitch thought of as the similarities and differences between having this Jewish state that was sort of more directly caused by the Soviet Union and was right under their thumb, also geographically speaking, versus Israel, which, especially in the beginning, was also very socialist, but it was more removed, and Israelis were a little bit more on their own than the Jewish citizens of Judenstadt were. The Israelis were a little bit more independent, it seems like. But one thing I'll definitely say is that reading this book made me think about areas of history that I should perhaps look into. I mean, I think I know a fair bit about Israeli history. I'm not a huge expert, but I have paid more attention perhaps than many. It would be more interesting to track the similarities and differences with more specific knowledge perhaps, and it certainly seems like Zelitch was thinking of that specific knowledge in her opening prologue of sorts that she wrote to introduce the idea of her book. Anywho, next, I just started this book, Under the UDALA Trees by Chinelo Okparanta. I'm reading it for the Eric and Anna book club, and later this week I'm hoping to finish this and do a double review of this book, and then also An Unrestored Woman by Shobha Rao, which was one of their August picks. And I'm not very far into this, but I'm enjoying it so far. It's definitely an intriguing premise, which deals with civil war in Nigeria and social issues such as the treatment of LGBTQ people. But right now we're very much in the setup background stage before we get into the main character's main story. But so far so good. And here is the aforementioned third book in my Jewish alternative history reading project this month. This is ISRA by Nava Semel and translated by Jessica Cohen. Hello again, Jessica Cohen. I read and enjoy most of the things that she translates, I believe. Anyway, this is Nava Semel's take on alternate Jewish history. ISRA was inspired by a true historical event. Before Theodore Herzl, there was Mordechai Manuel Noah, an American journalist, diplomat, playwright, and visionary. In September 1825, he bought Grand Island, downriver from Niagara Falls, from the local Native Americans as a place of refuge for the Jewish people, and called it Ararat. But no Jews came. Noah became a footnote in history, and the option for a Jewish state in North America was washed away by the tide of Zionism. But what would have happened if Jews from all over the world had followed Noah's call and fulfilled his vision? This novel poses an alternate history where Jews fleeing persecution did come to Ararat. Over time, Israel has evolved into a great city-state, a suburb of Buffalo, becoming the smallest state within the United States. Had history thus been altered, Israel would not exist, and there would have not been a Holocaust. I'd say that's a pretty dramatic claim that there'd be no Holocaust. I don't know, I think the Holocaust is seen as smaller than it really was, like only a German thing, where really it was more of a European thing. So a few Jews in Buffalo, I don't know if that would have made much of a difference, but that's my take. Obviously, any stone dropped into the waters of the past would have ripples of varying effects into the future, so it's a question that can't necessarily be answered. And now I'm wondering if this book will be the most like what I call the granddaddy book, The Yiddish Policeman's Union by Michael Chabon, which I haven't read yet. A lot of people were also comparing that book to Judenstaat, and I was thinking of it here because The Yiddish Policeman's Union, I believe, also takes place in the 19th century, or at least it takes place in North America, with Alaska being a Jewish state. So it'll be interesting to read this and see how Nava Semel, who is Israeli, our first Israeli author, I believe, to tackle this in my readings. Interesting to see how she takes it. And I do intend to read the Granddaddy book sooner or later. I do own it. So now on to a third sort of reading project this week, because it is the high holidays. I, starting last year, decided I'd like to read some more religious-inspired books. Last year I ended up reading a piece of biblical scholarship analyzing the Book of Numbers, which was pretty much way beyond me. I remember I brought it with me to Yom Kippur services where I got there early, and I was sitting across from this woman and her small children, and her small children, her preteen children, to be more accurate. The girl was reading a Twilight book, and the boy was reading a Harry Potter book. And when the service started, we all took up our machzors, our high holiday prayer books, but I saw that the girl was still sneaking in Twilight reading during the service when she could. But for me, I was like relieved to put down my Book of Numbers book and to pick up a machzor and have the rabbis lead me by the hand on what to read. And there were some, there are interesting pieces of poetry and other writings in the margins often, but they tend to be more digestible, especially in little doses like that, than this rather long and complicated exegesis on the Book of Numbers. But anywho, that was last year. This year I'm reading My Jewish Year by Abigail Pogrebin. I've mentioned it a few times because it was one of my anticipated reads of 2017, so I first mentioned it in January, and picked it up much earlier this year, and haven't read it yet, but what a better time to read it than now, because this book chronicles Abigail Pogrebin's attempts to follow all of the Jewish holidays in one year. Like me, Abigail Pogrebin is largely a secular Jew. So I'm very interested to see what she takes out of this project, both from her secular upbringing and also because she is a reporter, so she knows how to research and talk to people and dig out information. I do believe she talks to rabbis and other scholars. In fact, I just listened to an interview that she gave on the Book of Life podcast, so I'll link that down below. So yes, this will be my High Holidays reading. But not my only High Holidays reading. My other High Holidays reading will be to finish this book. This is the Woman's Torah Commentary, and I have also talked about this book several months ago in some of my videos when I was reading it in little chunks, but I have since fallen off the wagon and haven't read it in a couple of months, I believe. But I've roughly been reading it for a year because this book is divided into what we call parshas, which are little segments of the Bible that Jews read throughout the year, and then it culminates around the time of the High Holidays and we begin again. So we have several female rabbis in here offering commentaries on these parshas. And it's been a mixed bag, of course, and obviously the specific texts that they've been commenting on have been varied as well. But for the most part, I've really been enjoying it. Sometimes I find something deeper to dig into in the text than I knew about before. Sometimes the sexism is a little grating in the Bible, but often. But I'm always just inspired by the fact that in this day and age in progressive Judaism, we have female rabbis at all who have studied the texts as much, if not more so, than men throughout history. I also read an interesting article recently that sort of debunked and deflated a Haredi ultra-Orthodox myth about them being the original Jews, the ones that, came right down from Sinai and haven't changed at all in 5,000 years. And that, of course, all of the men were studying in Talmud classes and yeshivas ever since the beginning of time, and that's not true at all, because it would be unsustainable for all of the men of Judaism to be studying all day and not helping to keep the family afloat financially. So anyway, in the modern day, actually, I think more people than ever are studying Torah and Talmud, and women are joining them, and it's been inspiring, as I said, to read their words, and I am looking forward to completing Deuteronomy over this next week. Or their, commentary on Deuteronomy, but, And thank goodness I've been taking notes throughout the whole time so that at least I can look back on my commentaries on their commentaries if I ever want to for individual parshot. So that about covers it for me. I do feel like I have a lot of reading going on, which makes me happy, especially since this month has actually been more hectic than I thought it would be, and I'm reading a little slower than I thought I would, but it seems like I'm still getting some stuff done, so yay! And I hope that those of you celebrating Rosh Hashanah have a great one. It's my favorite holiday, so Shana Tova. Time for renewal and turning over a new leaf, and I hope that the rest of you have a great week as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.